in a spirit of prayer and meditation. After our spoken prayer, we'll have some time in silence, and then we'll sing together Spirit of Life, hymn number 123, which is also printed in your order of service. We'll sing first in English and then in Spanish. Our prayer this morning is by Leif Seligman. We pause in the stillness to rest for a moment, to quiet ourselves so that we can feel what stirs within us. Each breath draws us closer to the pulse of life, and with each exhalation, we make room for something new. May we find in this gathering the comfort of those who care. May we encounter patience along our growing edges and compassion in our most tender spots. Here, may we find the inspiration and encouragement we need to face our challenges and to nurture ourselves. And in the presence of suffering across the globe, may we redouble our efforts to practice kindness where we are, with the hope that the light of our actions travels like the light of faraway stars. May our gestures of compassion and generosity seed possibility. May we travel humbly with one another, choosing reconciliation over resentment as we try to live right-sized. When life presses in and shifts us off balance, when pain assails us, when frustration mounts, may the rhythm of our breath steady us and bring us back to a place of gratitude. Amen. Periodically, the president of our denomination, the Unitarian Universalist Association, will send out a message. Our president right now is Reverend Susan Frederick Gray, and this is the message that she sent on December 30th. 2019. It will act as our reading this morning. Dear ones, my heart continues to grieve for the Jewish community in Muncie, New York, as they grieve and tend to one another. I pray for the wider Jewish community in New York and around the country. This attack was the 13th incident of anti-Semitism in New York in the past 3 weeks. I am thinking of my Jewish siblings within Unitarian Universalism tonight and our congregations that have experienced acts of violence and acts of vandalism, including anti-Semitic vandalism. The rise in anti-Semitism is real and deadly. Across this country, the rise in hate crimes against Jews, Muslims, people of color, immigrants, trans people, LGBTQIA+ people. It calls us to do more to resist fear and hate, to speak up in the midst of growing racism, xenophobia, and white nationalism. All of these forms of hate foster violence and create fear. As a people of goodwill, as a people of faith, as Unitarian Universalists, may we remember our calling to nurture the values and practices of compassion and of interdependence. May we speak and act and live in ways that foster more compassion, solidarity, and a powerful form of love that casts out fear, so we might better protect and care for one another for everyone, for the wholeness of our humanity. May we remember, even as we acknowledge our capacity as human beings for violence, that there is so much more that is possible for humanity. So much more care and goodness and generosity. When we choose love, we nurture that possibility. May we find the resiliency and faith in times of tragedy and violence to continue to kindle what is life-giving. And may we all hold each other and our loved ones more closely these days and be tender with ourselves, making room for our grief and for our love. Thank you. It was about a year ago now when I came down from this high pulpit onto the floor and made a confession to you that I no longer believed in human goodness. I mean, I hadn't given up on the inherent worth and dignity of every person, or that we have goodness inside of us. But I admitted to you that I no longer believed that we as a people were inherently good, only good, just needed to be loved enough, and we would then always be good, do the right thing, love the world back. It was a heartbreaking revelation to come to terms with and to share with you. But in a way, it was also liberating. And it was less disappointing not to expect goodness from everyone all the time. To acknowledge that we all have within us, that I have within me, the capacity to do great harm. I shared with you the story of the two wolves, which is often told as a Cherokee Indian story, but really isn't. A grandfather tells his grandson, "There are two wolves fighting inside you. One wolf represents hatred and fear and selfishness. The other wolf represents goodness and kindness and hope. They are right now fighting inside you," he tells him. "But grandfather," the boy asks, "which wolf will win?" "Whichever one you feed, my dear," he says. "Whichever one you feed." Maybe we are not inherently good or inherently sinful, I told you, but we have the capacity for both inside of us. And so we have some agency about which one we feed. And so goodness, I have come to understand, is something we have to work at, strengthen, feed, and nurture. The question then becomes, how do we do that? And how do we not become demoralized by the other wolf, the wolf who also lives inside of us and who is also fed sometimes? That day, I came down from the pulpit and asked you for stories of goodness in the world, and you obliged. And the rest of the worship service was spent hearing story after story, acts of kindness, big and small, people choosing generosity above selfishness, courage above fear, connection above isolation. And it was a balm for my soul. But we haven't really returned to the topic during worship. and I think it's time that we do. Now, as wildfires rage, now as war looms like a dark cloud on the horizon, now as we begin to navigate a winter that might be hard on us emotionally, it feels like now is a good time to return to that idea of the goodness inside each of us and how we might feed it, nurture it, strengthen it for the times ahead. And so to learn, we return to stories. I have 3 for you this morning. And I will look for some times in the near future when you can share more stories with me as well, because I really liked that. The first story is from the early 1990s. During the Bosnian conflict, life was difficult in Sarajevo. Yugoslavia was splintering into various nations, including what would become Bosnia and Herzegovina. Serb nationalists surrounded Sarajevo and laid siege. For the residents of this city, life was a daily ordeal of trying to find food and water amidst the shelling and sniper fire that claimed so many innocent lives. We have within ourselves the capacity for war. On May 27, 1992, a long line of people had queued up at one of the few still functioning bakeries, waiting for bread. The line snaked out of the store and into the square outside. Suddenly, as people waited, a mortar shell fell into the middle of the line, killing 22 people. 22 innocent people waiting in line for bread. Nearby, Vedran Smalovic, the principal cellist of the Sarajevo Opera, was practicing in his apartment. Albinoni's Adagio in G minor. He stopped his practice to run outside and help the wounded and to despair at the carnage. He felt powerless. The next day, Smalovic, dressed in his musician's black tails and white shirt, took his cello to the spot where those waiting for bread had been killed. He sat down on his stool in the crater of the blast, and he began to play. Adagio in G minor. It is a hauntingly beautiful song. He played in a daze, but never had he felt the music so fully. In spite of the risk, people gathered to listen. When he was finished, he packed up his cello and went to a coffee shop nearby. And quickly people came up to him, expressing their appreciation. "This is what we needed," they told him. "We needed to hear your beautiful music." Smalovic went back the next day and the next. For 22 days he played, one for each person killed. Sniper fire continued around him, and mortars still rained down in the neighborhood, but Smalovic never stopped playing. His music was a gift to all hiding in their basements with rubble above their heads, a voice for peace for those dodging the bullets of the snipers. "Only the cellist and his music brings hope," someone wrote. Hope that mankind is still capable of humanity, that the old world is not completely lost, that the war has not destroyed everything. One of the ways we feed the goodness inside of us is by acknowledging the existence of beauty, by not letting it die out, even in the midst of cruelty and despair. We must still make music, create art, express love. It is what proves to us and to others that though there is evil, goodness can prevail. Another story. Last month, Pastor Brenda Haywood was awarded the Tim McCarthy Human Rights Champion Award. She told this story at the awards ceremony, and I was quite moved by it. Brenda was born and raised in a part of Newton, Massachusetts called The Village. It was a small community of African and Native American heritage. Growing up, though she lived in a positive and loving community, she was also surrounded by stories and pictures of World War II. That, along with nighttime air raid drills, filled her heart with fear and a sense of threat. The morning after one such warning drill, Brenda was walking to school with friends, and they all shared their fears with one another of war and possible enemy attacks. Though their hearts were full of goodness and innocence, they also had a child's understanding of patriotism. And so as they came upon a Chinese family's place of business on their route, they felt that they were in the presence of their country's enemy. The children conjured up their courage and told the family to leave our country. Because this was the village, it didn't take long for a word of their verbal attack to spread around the community. And because it takes a village to raise a child, it was the village who taught the children why they were wrong, and gently but firmly brought them back into right relationship with the family they had harmed. After lengthy community conversations, a work plan of community service was created, including a letter of apology to the Chinese family. Brenda's community service included helping out at the Chinese family's business every Saturday for a month. She and her friends spent time with the family and soon became interested in their personal stories and also shared their own, which developed into lasting friendships throughout their school years and beyond. This is one of the life experiences that shaped Brenda's future of activism and community service. And she told this story to a gathering of people who were there to honor her goodness, because she knows that we all have within ourselves the capacity to live in fear, division, and separateness from others. And we have inside us the capacity to live in connection, friendship, and community. And it is our responsibility, our spiritual journey, to strengthen that capacity to love. One of the ways we feed the goodness inside of us is by acknowledging connection, by getting to know people who are different than us, and by allowing ourselves to be known. We feed the goodness inside us by listening to our family and friends and communities who hold us to account for our actions and ask us to be our best selves. We strengthen the goodness inside us by surrounding ourselves with people who see the goodness in us and remind us of it. One last story. In an article in The Atlantic called On the Res, Ian Fraser writes about the Oglala Sioux Indians who live on the Pine Ridge Reservation in southwestern South Dakota. It's a challenging place to live. Sue Ann Marie Big Crow was born on the res in 1974. Her birth came at a dark time on the reservation. The ongoing battle between supporters and opponents of the tribal president Dick Wilson's government led to violence so pervasive and unpredictable that many people were afraid to leave their homes. Sue Ann's mother was strict. She kept her daughters safe in part by demanding that they be in their house or the yard by the time the streetlights came on. She forbade most activities, but encouraged the girls in sports. Growing up, Sue Ann spent endless hours practicing basketball. When she was in the 5th grade, she heard somewhere that to improve your dribbling, you should bounce a basketball 1,000 times a day with each hand. She performed this daily exercise faithfully on the cement floor of the patio until her mother and sisters tired of the sound. For variety, she would shoot layups against the gutter and the drain pipe until they came loose from the house and had to be repaired. In high school, Sue Ann joined the Pine Ridge Lady Thorpes, the all-native women's basketball team. In the fall of 1988, she was a freshman, just 14 years old, when the Pine Ridge Lady Thorpes went to the nearby town of Lead to play a game. Getting ready in the locker room, the Pine Ridge girls could hear the din from the Lead fans. They were yelling fake Indian war cries. The girls' faces fell. The usual plan for the pregame warm-up was for the visiting team to run onto the court in a line, take a lap or two around the floor, shoot some baskets, and then go to their bench at courtside. And after that, the home team would come out and do the same, and then the game would begin. Usually the Thorpes lined up for their entry more or less according to height, which meant that senior Donnie DeCory, one of the tallest, went first. As the team waited in the hallway leading from the locker room, the heckling got louder. Some fans were waving food stamps. Others yelled, "Where's the cheese?" The joke being that if Indians were lining up, it must be to get government commodity cheese. The Lead High School band had joined in with fake Indian drumming. Donnie DeCory looked out the door and told her teammates, "I can't handle this." Sue Ann quickly offered to go first in her place. She was so eager that Donnie became suspicious. "Don't embarrass us," Donnie told her. Sue Ann said, I won't embarrass you." Donnie gave her the ball. Sue Ann came running onto the court, dribbling the basketball with her teammates running behind. On the court, the noise was deafening. Sue Ann went right down the middle and suddenly stopped when she got to center court. Her teammates were taken by surprise. Some of them bumped into each other. Sue Ann turned to Donnie DeCory and tossed her the ball. Then she stepped into the jump ball circle at center court, facing the Lead fans. She unbuttoned her warm-up jacket, took it off, draped it over her shoulders, and began to do the Lakota shawl dance. Sue Ann knew all the traditional dances. She had competed in many powwows as a little girl. And the dance she chose is a young woman's dance, graceful and modest and show-offy, all at the same time. And then she started to sing. Sue Ann sang in Lakota, swaying back and forth in the jump ball circle, doing the shawl dance, using her warm-up jacket for a shawl. The crowd went completely silent. All that stuff the Lead fans were yelling, it was like she reversed it somehow, a teammate says. In the sudden quiet, all they could hear was her Lakota song. When she finished, Sue Ann dropped her jacket, took the ball from Donnie DeCory, and ran a lap around the court, dribbling expertly and fast. The audience began to cheer and applaud. She sprinted to the basket, went up in the air, and laid the ball through the hoop, and the fans went wild. When people tell the story on the res nowadays, which they still do, they say that, of course, Pine Ridge went on to win the game. The sports records that year don't support that memory. But it doesn't matter. The girls won something bigger that day. It was funny, Donnie DeCory says, but when we played lead again, the games were really good, and we got to know some of the girls on the team. Later, when we went to a tournament and Lead was there, we were hanging out with them and eating pizza with them. We got to know some of their parents, too. What Sue Ann did made a lasting impression and changed the whole situation. We found out there are some really good people in Lead. We have inside of us the capacity to make fun of others, to degrade them and insult them. And we have inside of us the capacity to rise above, to connect with our own dignity, and to forgive. One of the ways that we feed the goodness inside is to remember where we come from, to remember what brings us alive, to remember the beautiful things we know about ourselves. We feed the goodness inside of us by reconnecting to what roots us, like our culture and spiritual practices, and our self-created teams. When we begin to hear messages that question our value, it helps to remember the goodness inside of us. In her message to us, Reverend Susan Frederick Gray said, "May we remember, even as we acknowledge our capacity as human beings for violence, that there is so much more that is possible for humanity. So much more care and goodness and generosity. When we choose love, we nurture that possibility. May we find the resiliency and faith in times of tragedy and violence to continue to kindle what is life-giving." Maya Angelou writes, "My wish for you is that you continue. Continue to be who and how you are, to astonish a mean world with your acts of kindness. Continue to allow humor to lighten the burden of your tender heart. Continue, in a society dark with cruelty, to let the people hear the grandeur of God in the peals of your laughter. Continue to let your eloquence elevate the people to heights they had only imagined. Continue to remind the people that each is as good as the other, and that no one is beneath nor above you. Continue to remember your own young years and look with favor upon the lost and the least and the lonely. Continue to put the mantle of your protection around the bodies of the young and defenseless. Continue to take the hand of the despised and diseased and walk proudly with them in the high street. Some might see you and be encouraged to do likewise. Continue to plant a public kiss of concern on the cheek of the sick and the aged and the infirm, and count that as a natural action to be expected. Continue to let gratitude be the pillow upon which you kneel to say your nightly prayer. And let faith be the bridge you build to overcome evil and welcome good. May it be so. Amen. And blessed be. Continue to let gratitude be the pillow upon which you kneel to say your nightly prayer, and let faith be the bridge you build to overcome evil and welcome good. May it be so. Go in peace.